Here we go. So Boaz has business to take care of today. He has to go downtown and settle some paperwork. He promised Ruth in that strange evening that he had that he was going to take first thing in the morning is take care of business. And Nomi said, if Boaz says he's going to take care of business, he will take care of business. He's not the procrastinating type, and he's not he'll just get it done. Now, don't forget, this matter of the Moavis situation, this was settled law. The Sanhedrin met and they concluded that the people that were Achzorim, and the ones that we don't want to accept converts to the Jewish people were the tribe of the people of Moav, because when the Yidden left Eretz Yisrael and they left Mitzrayim, coming to Eretz Yisrael, excuse me, the Moavim were particularly nasty to the Jewish people and not friendly. And such people with such a disposition are not capable of being Baishonim and Rahmonim. However, the women, they were home. They didn't participate in this achzorius that their husbands did. And so that is why the halacha is that the Moavis may become a convert. And this controversy was unclear until it was settled. But not everybody knew about it. And Boaz had to take care of business. And here he goes. So Boaz, Allah Hashar, and Boaz now in the morning, he got up in the morning and he went up to the gate. We'll talk about that in a second. Vayeshev Sham, and he sat there. But Boaz went up. We're not talking about the topography and mountains here, because the mountains, Eretz Yisrael, there was in the hills, the Judean hills. There were hills. But we're talking about up in a level. He went to the higher part of town socially, like Fifth Avenue or wherever the courthouse is. Vayeshev Sham, and he sat there. Now, don't forget, he's looking for somebody specific to settle. What did he promise Ruth? He needs to speak to the Goyel. I can't marry you and I can't buy your property because somebody else has rights before me, and I need to settle it with him. V'hinei haGoyel over, and behold, of the 7 billion people in the world, the Goyel is walking by. What a coincidence. Asher diber Boaz. That is the guy. This is the guy that Boaz was looking for. Vayemer, and Boaz says to him, Surah shva pei pleni almaini vayosar vayeshev. He says, hey, Mr. Pleni Almoini. Pleni Almoini could be translated as John Doe, somebody without a name. Come here and sit down. Now, what was he doing there? Of all the people in the world, why was this one person that he's looking for happened to be walking by at that moment? So the Medrash says that Hashem said, Naomi did her Mesiras Nefesh. Boaz was doing his Mesiras Nefesh. Ruth did her Mesiras Nefesh. Now it's God's turn. And God made it that this Pleni Almoini would be at that place at that time. In fact, the Medrash says the meaning of Pleni Almoini, the Malbim says the meaning of Pleni Almoini means dazed. He was like, what? What am I doing here? How did I get here? And where am I? And all of a sudden, Boaz tells him, sit. So he just did what he was told. He was like, like you bang a baseball bat over someone's head. And he's like, whoa, how did I get here? Rashi says, Pleni Almoini. What's the word, Pleni Almoini? This was actually, we know his name. His name was Toiv. Toiv was the name of Boaz's uncle. But we don't mention him by name, because he refused to do the deal. He's not going to get his name mentioned. So we call him Pleni Almoini. Rashi says the word Pleni Almoini, Mitorgam b'Neviim, is translated in the Neviim as Kasiu Tamir, mysterious and hidden, Mechusav and Elam, Lashon ki yipole, hayipole me'Hashem davar. Something, can Hashem hide? Can you hide anything from God? This is what it says in the Chumash. So that Rashi is explaining what the word Pella and Ploini and Almoini. Like I said, Malbim has a different interpretation. Malbim says he was dazed. And Rashi says another interpretation of the word Almoini. Somebody, Almain mibli shame. He is an alman. He's like alone with no name. Shaya alman medivre Torah, and also he was an alman. He was missing the divrei Torah. What was the missing of the divrei Torah? Shahaya loy lidresh amoini v'loy amoinis and moyavi v'loy moyavis who amar, and he didn't do that. Pen ashchis as nachlosi. He says, "Oh, there's this thing about the amoini and amoivis. I don't want to get involved." So that was actually what he was not knowledgeable, and that's another interpretation of the word almoini. So pasuk beis vayemer pasuk beis vayikach asara anoshim, and Boaz gathered 10 men miziknei ha'ir. And he gathered them. Vayemer shvu pei, sit here. Vayeshvu imay. And Boaz gathered not the Sanhedrin. He just gathered 10 elders, the most important people in town. Vayemer, and Pasuk Gimel, Vayemer, and Boaz says to the Goyal in the presence of these 10 people, Chel kasasoda asher lachinu. This land, this field that belongs to our brother Elimelech. So guess what? Mochra Naomi Hashava Mizdei Moav. Naomi, the one, that Naomi, the one that came back from Mizdei Moav, she's selling it. Now, so we know until now that Naomi was destitute and poor, as was Ruth. They were collecting the tzedakah in the fields. They owned a piece of property. It's, you sometimes you have, like you have here on our corner here or whatever, you have an abandoned building that's owned by somebody, and then maybe they didn't pay their taxes, but they don't have the wherewithal to plant and to invest, and just because they own the property doesn't mean that they had any money. In fact, they knew that they had this money, and they had to sell they had to sell this property so that they could make ends meet. So Boaz says to this Ploini Almoini, Mr. John Doe, sell us your property. This property is for sale, and you, as a goyel, you get to buy it. Va'ani amarti, and I said, Egla as Nechalemer, I will find out Knei Neged Hayeshvim Beneged Ziknei Ami. And I said, and I told her that I will inquire from you whether or not you're interested in purchasing this property in front of everybody. V'im lo yigal hagidoli, and if you're not going to buy this property, tell me right now, ve'eda ki ein zuos chaligel, and so that I will know, because there's nobody else. You are the goyel, v'anochi acharecha, and I'm next. Vayemer anochi ego, says, no, I'm going to buy the land. Why not? I'm going to buy this property because sounds like a good deal. I'm the goyel. We want to keep the property in the Shevet Yehuda. So it seems like a good deal. I'll buy it. Says Rashi, Rashi says, what do you mean? There was nobody else in the world that would buy the property, but rather there's nobody else, Karev Ligal. There's no one more of a relative than you. I have plenty of cousins, but we're all in the same level of purchasers. You, as an uncle, you get first rights. So I'm offering it to you first, because that's what I told Ruth that I will find out whether or not you'll be doing that. Pasuk hey, Vayemer Boaz, And Boaz said, and one little detail, a contingency. I need to just mention one detail. Vayomer Boaz, on that time, at that day that you will purchase the property from Naomi, and from Rus, the Moabite, Eshes Hames, the wife of the deceased. You're also committing to marry her and to keep the memory of her dead husband alive. So he said, well, so Rashi says, Pasuk Hey, Umi Esrus Hamayvia at Tzarich Liknais. You also need to do that. Vihi Eina Misratza Elim Kain Tisena. And he is not interested, she is not interested in selling the property unless you take her as well. It's a package deal. Pasuk Vav. Well, in that case, says Vayemer Hagoyel Lo Yochal Li Goyel Li. I will not do this deal. Why is his reason? Look at what he says. Pen ashchis es nachalosi. I will. Rashi will explain that I will. It'll mess up my family. How does he translate here in the pen ashes? It will, lest it mar my heritage. Ge'al l'cha ata es gulasi kiloi uchaligel. You buy the property because I can't. And he says it twice. He says, I won't and I can't, and you do it. Because he wanted it very clear. This is a no. What part of no don't you understand? Like that expression, no, I'm not buying it. Pasuk Vav says Rashi, Pen ashchis es nachlasi. What does it mean that ashchis es nachlasi? I'm going to mar my heritage. Zari, my children. Nachlas Hashem bonim, like the pasuk in Tehillim. Nachlas Hashem bonim, that one's nachala is one's heritage is his children. The loss is b'gam b'zari, and it will make like it's what was again? Yes, it will create a stigma. This the whole thing with the amoini umayavi. I'm not going there. But everyone's going to say, "Oh, he's got a beautiful family, nice children, lives on a comfortable estate, well-to-do yichas family. I'm going to marry this mayavis, and first of all, she's going to come into the house. I'm already married. It's going to be a second wife." And the kids, loy, not interested. V'to, and he made a mistake. But he was wrong. The irony in all of this is that he was so concerned about pen ashchis es nachlosi, my heritage will be marred, that we don't even know his name because he's Pliny Almoini. He was worried that his reputation should be ruined. He doesn't even have a reputation. Boaz, on the other hand, turned out to be the one with the reputation. But it's one of those ironic things. Pasuk Zayin. And by the way, this is a crowd is gathering here. This is happening downtown. The finest, the 10 most choshev people of town are there, and everyone's listening and gathering. What is Boaz doing here? Why is he gathering all these people? What's going on? So this is very public, this whole thing, and this is exactly what Boaz wanted. It should be very public. And v'zeis lefanim b'Yisrael, and this is how things used to be. Once upon a time, in the olden days, when people want to do a transaction, this is how they would do it. V'zeis lefanim b'Yisrael al hageula ve'al hatmura. When people would want to do redemption and exchange to confirm anything, so l'kayim davar sholaf ish es nalei v'nosan l'reyeyu. One would remove his shoe and hand it to his friend. V'zeis ha'te'uda b'Yisrael, and this is the heritage of the Jewish people of the Eden. Te'uda is like there's a sefer called Sefer HaTorah, the book of our heritage. This is how we do things. So, al hageula, says Rashi, zu mechira, and tmura is chalifin, exchange and sales. Okay, it's a contract law. So therefore, since this is how things are done when we want to do business and exchange, and so therefore Boaz said to the Goyel, Knei loch vayishlif nale, you buy it, and he removed his shoe. Rashi will give a little more details about the shoe thing, but let's do the Rashi, and then I'll tell you something interesting about that. Sholafish nale, says Rashi, Maisa Kinyan, it's a Kinyan. Today, Rashi is saying, just like as today we do the scarf instead of the shoe. Have you ever seen a Kinyan with a rov? They pick up a gartel, a scarf, or something. So in those days, they would do a shoe. The shoe is a very practical thing because everybody's got one. And when you take it off, you're not exposed, like taking off your shirt or something. So it was just the perfect. And it's maybe you need to wash your hands afterwards. But besides for that, it's a very practical thing to make a kinyan with. But the funny thing that Rashi brings an interesting story in the problem with it. Our sages in the Gemara and Bab Metzia says, "Mi nasan l'mi." Who gave the shoe to who? If you notice in the pasuk, it's ambiguous here. The shoe, he took off his shoe and gave it to him. Who's he and who's him? There are those that say that the buyer gives the shoe, and so therefore, Boaz was the one that gave it to the goyel. The Caleb show makna, and some say the receiver. The goyel nasam laboyaz. It's very funny. The Gemara in Bab Metzia is dealing with contracts, and it comes to this pasuk. Let's see the Torah. How are contracts conducted? It comes to this pasuk in Rus. Here was a contract was done, and they handed him a shoe. We have no information. It's so ambiguous. Who handed what to who? And the Gemara comes out with machlekes. Who gives the shoe to who? They have the Medrash brings a few other examples about this ambiguity. There was when the 10 tribes split from the 12 from the two, the Malchus Yisrael, the Malchus Yehuda. So Achia Shaleni ripped the coat of Yeravim ben Nevat. Or I'm sorry, the coat was. We don't know if it was Achia Shaleni's coat that was torn, or it was Yeravim ben Nevat's coat, and a few other examples. But yeah, moving on. Pasuk Tes. Vayemer Boaz laskenim b'chol ha'am, and Boaz said to all the elders and to all the people, because like I said, the crowd had gathered. Eidim atem hayom, you are all witnesses. Ki kanisi es kol asher leElimelech, that I have purchased everything that is to Elimelech. Beis kol asher lechilyon umachlein biyad nami, and everything that is for kilyon and machlein in the hand of nami. Not machlein and kilyon and machlein. There's so Vayemer Boaz, says Rashi. To whom did he say it? To the 10 people that gathered. All the people there that were witnesses. They all got to see that they were all witnesses. By the way, the reason I mentioned Kilyon and Machlin, because Machlin was the husband of Rus, not Kilyon. Why was Kilyon mentioned first? Because with this transaction, there's a lot of interpretations as to why, but they were afraid that Orpah may have a claim to this deed as well. And Orpah is back in Moav. Maybe one day she'll show up saying, my husband had a claim to this estate, and that would have been really trouble. So he said in front of everybody, no, this deal is done, and there's no liens on this property at all. Uh, Pasuk Yud, v'gam es Rus Hamoyavia, and also Ruth the Moabite. Konisi li Aisha's Machlin, the wife of Machlin, Konisi li Leisha, I have acquired as a wife, Lahakim Shem Hameis al Nachlose, so so that the name of the deceased would not be obliterated. V'lo yikoris Shem Hameis mi'im echav u'mishar mekemei edim atem hayoim. So that his name will not be forgotten. You are all witness to this today here, all of you here today. So this is basically a wedding happening here. In fact, the Medrash says that the reason he brought the 10 people here is so that in case, no matter who marries her, whether it's him or whether it's the Ploni Almoini, they're ready to go for Chuppah and Kiddushin. But obviously the Ploni Almoini refused. So he ended up marrying him. V'gam Pasuk Yud Aleph. Oh, Lakim es Hameis, says Rashi. I'm sorry, Rashi Pasuk Yud. How is it that the nachala that the nachala will be remembered of the deceased? So he says, Miteich she'ishtei, the wife of Machlin, Yotzo bo benachla, Machnisas u'meitzia. This is not a yibum. Rashi's clarifying here. He says his name will be remembered not because any yibum was done here, but rather by her hanging around the estate, coming and going, bringing things, and this was the wife of Machlin. So people will always remember her. Shmoi Niskar Aleh. That's how her deceased husband would be remembered. So Rashi, it's Pasuk Yud Aleph says, Vayemru chol ha'am asher b'shar v'askenim edim, and so all the people of the city, of the gates, and the skenim and the edim, so that everybody, and they said, Yitein Hashem es ha'isha haba el beisecha, may the woman that comes to your home be Kirachel Ucheleah, Asher Banu Shteim as Beis Yisrael, who are the founders of Beis Yisrael. V'asechayel befrosa ukro shem bebeis lachem. May you be how does he translate it? May built the house, prosper in Efrat, and be famous in Beis Lechem. So Krav Hashem is proclaim. Rashi's going to explain. Rashi says, Pasuk Yud Aleph, Afal Pisha Hoyu Mishevet Yehuda, right? Nevertheless, and they were from the Shevet of Yehuda, and Mibnei Leah, and they were the children of Leah. Meidim mehem al Rachel. They do, however, concede that Rachel hoisa ikra shel habayis. The foundation of the home was Rachel. V'higdimu Rachel l'Leah, and Rachel was not their bubby. Leah was their bubby, but they mentioned that may she be like Rachel and Leah. Ukra shem. Kilaymar Yigadel Shmecha means a proclamation. Not that, this is the name that we give him, because we say that at a bris, B'kara Shmei B'Yisrael, may his name be proclaimed. There's a thing about, it's a very, very delicate thing here. There was always this jealousy among the tribes. Yosef was the mefarnes of the Yidden in Mitzrayim. But Yaakov promised that the royalty will go to Yehuda. But Ephraim seemed to have been always a little bit, the 10 tribes, when you say 10 tribes, we refer to the 10 tribes, kind of felt that they were really the ones that were and to be the king. There was a jealousy, but Yehuda was the undisputed king, and David HaMelech eventually became the undisputed king. But the split happened very quickly afterwards. Reverted back to the 10 tribes and Yehuda. But here in this pasuk, there was a very nice gesture of reaching out. The people of Yehuda are reaching out to Rachel and conceding that we are all like one. In fact, Rachel is even before Leah. I was reading a story about the coronation recently. There's a stone that they do the coronation on, and it's a very special stone. They say that's where Jacob had his dream, and it was but it's kept in Scotland, and the British stole it. The English stole it captured it from Scotland. And when they reunited, they said, we're not reuniting until we get our stone back. So they made a deal. They said, okay, we'll be reunited, but the English wanted the stone for the coronation, which is in London, but the Scots wanted the stone to be with them in Scotland. So they make a deal. It's in Scotland. It's there all the time. Whenever there's a coronation, they bring it down to London. They do the coronation and bring it back to Scotland. So you have these rifts of tribes, and here there's some sort of a reconciliation gesture that Rachel went before Leah. Pasuk Yud Beis. Vayihi beischob keveis peretz. May your home be like Peretz. Remember Peretz. Asher yolda Somer liYehuda min hazera asher yitin Hashem lecha min hanara hazeis. He doesn't start from Yehuda. He starts from Peretz. The pasuk doesn't list the yichas from Yehuda. He starts from Peretz because Yehuda's did that story with Tamar, so they didn't want to mention him. We start from Peretz. That's the yichas. Kibeis Peretz sheyasanu mimenu, says Rashi, from whom we descend. Pasuk Yud Gimel, vayikach Boaz es Rus v'atilo leisha, and Boaz took Ruth as a wife, and she vayove eleha, and he was with her. Vayiten Hashem lo heiroyin v'atele ben, and God blessed her with pregnancy, and she gave birth to a son. Fatemarna hanoshim el Naomi, and the women said to Naomi, Baruch Hashem, asher lo hishbis lo goyel hayim v'yikara shmei b'Yisrael. Thank God that Hashem has not abandoned you and deprive you of a redeemer today, and may his name be famous in Israel. Pasuk Tezvav, v'hoya loch l'meishiv nefesh u'lechalkel sevoseich ki chaloseich asher ahavoseich, because and may he be to you as a restorer of life and to sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, bore him, and she is better to you, mishiva bonim, and 7 sons. Which 7 sons are these? The Mefarshim say these are Peretz. In the last pasuk here we're going to list them off. Aminadab, Nachshin, Salma, etc. We'll get to that in the next few psukim. Or it's just an expression, whatever. Who are the 7 sons? Tezvav v'hoya loch l'meishiv. Okay, pasuk Tezayin. Vatikach Naomi es hayeled, and Naomi took the child. Vatishisehu becheka, vati lo leimenes. And Naomi took over. She took the child and raised him from the great love that she had for him, and she raised him in her bosom. I think that's the correct word. But and she was faithfully raising him. And the neighbors, is that how we translate it? but Shchenes Shem Lemer Yulad Bein Naomi, but Tikrenu Shmoi Eved, who Avi Yishai, Avi David. And the women and the neighbors gave him a name, saying, a son has been born unto Naomi, and they called his name Oved. He is the father of Yishai, the father of David. Pasuk Yud Ches. Be'ela. By the way, also he says she named him Oved. Why didn't his father, name him Oved? Mefarshim say that Boaz died the next day. He was with Ruth for one night, and Ruth was pregnant, and Boaz died the next day. So that's why she's the one that named him Oved. Pasuk Yud Ches, V'ela Toldis Peretz Heilid es Chetzreim. And these are the generations of Peretz. Now, what Rashi says, V'ela Toldis Peretz, why are we talking about going back to Peretz? Lefi Sheyichas es David al Shmo shel Rus Amoyavia Chazar v'Yechasei al Shem Yehuda. Because we had just talked about the Bubbies and the Zaydis on the mother's side. Now we're going to talk about the Bubbies and Zaydis on the father's side. And the Chetzreim Heilides Ram, the Ram Heilides Aminadav, the Aminadav Heilides Nachshen, the Nachshen Heilides Salma. And now, Pasuk Chaval, the Salmoin is called, there he was called Salmoin, here is called Salmoin, because up until now we were taught, each one was a prince. And from here on, the Salmoin, now we're all approaching Malchus. We're talking, the names here are given for the future king. The Salmoin Heilid as Boaz, Boaz Heilid as Eved. And one more thing, and the Eved Heilid as Yishai, the Yishai Heilid as David. I just want to say real quick that the David HaMelech, for his whole life, was in the Tillim, it says, Rigzu v'al tachto. He was constantly ridiculed by being called Ben Yishai because of this yichas situation that he had. He was always teased, and he says to them, "And your bubby and Rachel and Leah, that's a Isser Chorus. My bubby is not as bad as it's a thing that he had to contend with all his life." And the reason I was asked to remind one more time, the reason we learned this Rus about before Shavuos is because, first of all, it's David HaMelech's yahrzeit. Second of all, it was also, the story happened in Zman HaKotzir, which is now. The Alter Rebbe specifically mentions, and it's also the Baal Shem Tov's yahrzeit, the Alter Rebbe specifically mentions that the reason we read Rus on Shavuos is to remind us that just like the hardship that the Rus went through, Torah is acquired through hardship.
Oh, yeah. That's all right.